Fake it until you make it. It's a phrase we've all heard before. Usually it means acting more confident than you really are, dressing a little better than you can afford, or pretending you've got everything figured out while you work toward the life you actually want. But for one Chinese influencer, the line between delusion and reality slowly disappeared. To her 250,000 followers, she appeared to be living the perfect luxury lifestyle. Her social media was filled with designer handbags, expensive cafes, and the kind of life most people could only dream of. But behind that carefully curated image was one of the most elaborate schemes the Chinese internet has ever seen. A story involving fake luxury bags, betrayed friendships, and millions of dollars stolen without anyone noticing. Little Fishballs was born in the 1990s into an ordinary working-class family in Fujian province. By all accounts, she was a well-behaved child. She had average grades, loved being around people, and eventually enrolled at a second-tier university where she majored in broadcasting and hosting. It was during those 4 years at university that her relationship with money began to change. For the first time in her life, she found herself surrounded by classmates from wealthy families. While Little Fishballs carefully stretched her monthly allowance of around 1,500 yuan or $200 to cover food, rent, and everyday expenses, many of the people around her lived in a completely different world. They upgraded to the newest phone without thinking, flew to Hong Kong for weekend concerts, and treated designer handbags the same way most people would buy a new pair of shoes. During her sophomore year, a roommate invited the class to celebrate her birthday at an upscale restaurant. As everyone around the table casually ordered steaks, bottles of wine, and talked about luxury brands and the latest designer bags, Little Fishballs was stunned by the price of every item on the menu. She later admitted she was so uncomfortable that she barely touched the lemon water the waiter had poured for her. That night, her roommate's boyfriend arrived in the Porsche to pick her up. The birthday girl leaned out of the car window and handed Little Fishballs a dessert that had barely been touched, telling her to take it back to the dorm for a late-night snack. It was probably intended as a kind gesture, but Little Fishballs saw it as a slap in the face. Standing there holding the leftovers as the Porsche pulled away, she felt embarrassed, pitied, and painfully aware of how far she stood outside the world she wanted to belong to. From that point on, she became increasingly obsessed with the world of wealth and luxury. She started spending more and more of her free time online. It was there that she created a new identity for herself, adopting the online handle Xiao Yu Wan Zi, or Little Fishballs. Fishballs, for anyone unfamiliar, are a popular street food across China, especially in Fujian province where she grew up, so the nickname gave her online persona a friendly, approachable image from the very start. She began posting photos on social media, teaching herself makeup by watching beauty influencers, and saving what little money she could to buy cosmetics. As her photography skills improved, she began to notice something. With the right angle, careful lighting, and enough editing, an outfit costing only a few dozen yuan could be made to look like an expensive designer brand. Little by little, she learned that on social media, appearances don't have to reflect reality. They only have to be convincing. After graduating, Fishball made a decision. Rather than looking for a normal job, she packed her bags and moved to Shanghai, determined to build a career as a modeling influencer. Life in Shanghai wasn't glamorous at first. She rented a tiny room on the outskirts of the city and was determined to stand out and fit into the cruel Chinese beauty standards. She survived on one meal a day, spent hours working out, and devoted herself to building the image she believed everyone was looking for. Slowly, the effort began to pay off. She started landing small modeling and advertising jobs, and for the first time, money began coming in. But instead of improving her situation, almost every yuan she earned went straight back into the online persona she was curating. She moved closer to the city center, traveled to popular influencer hotspots across China, and carefully staged every photo she posted online. Sometimes she would order nothing more than the cheapest drink at a cafe and spend hours taking and editing photographs that made it look as though she lived a life of effortless luxury. As her online following continued to grow, Fishball gradually found herself surrounded by the very people she had tried to become for years. Through Shanghai's influencer scene, she became friends with well-known creators like PP Zheng, Sui Jiao Jiao, and later wealthy socialites such as Salami Panini. To her, these women represented the life she had always dreamed of. Despite appearing to fit in, she knew she was different. Many of her new friends had grown up surrounded by wealth. They talked casually about studying overseas, family businesses, and luxury brands they'd owned since they were teenagers, experiences that Fishball couldn't learn. She had spent years carefully building the image that she belonged in that world, but beneath the designer outfits and carefully edited photographs, she knew it was all built on a house of cards. But little Fishballs had something special, the ability to read people. Friends later described her as thoughtful, dependable, and incredibly attentive. She remembered birthdays, noticed the smallest details, and was often the first person to show up when someone was going through a breakup or a hard time. Over time, she became exactly the kind of friend everyone wanted to have. Before long, she was being invited to parts of their lives that few outsiders ever saw: private dinners, luxury shopping trips, overseas vacations, sleepovers at each other's houses. As those experiences filled her social media feed, her audience grew alongside them, climbing from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of followers. As her popularity grew, so did her income. Brand deals became more frequent, and at her peak, Fishballs was earning around 50,000 to 60,000 yuan a month, roughly 7,000 to 8,000 US dollars. By most people's standards, she'd made it. She'd built a successful career in Shanghai, surrounded herself with wealthy friends, and racked up hundreds of thousands of followers. But behind the scenes, she knew the harsh truth. Her online success had created a lifestyle she couldn't actually afford. The image she spent years building now demanded more and more from her. Every new photo shoot needed a different outfit. Every gathering with her friends came with unspoken expectations. Every luxury item she posted invited another one to take its place. No matter how much money she earned, it never seemed to be enough. The more convincing her online persona came, the more trapped she felt by it. She later recalled struggling with insomnia, losing significant amounts of hair from stress, and constantly worrying that everything she built could disappear overnight. It felt like the influencer lifestyle had her in a chokehold, something insatiable she had to keep feeding. It was around this time that Fishballs made a mistake that would ultimately change the course of her life. Trying to reinforce the wealthy, heiress image she spent years creating, she spent nearly 30,000 yuan through a personal shopper to buy a Celine handbag that was extremely popular at the time. To her, it wasn't a luxury purchase for herself. It was an investment in the identity she worked so hard to build. A few days later, she met up with her friend, PP Jane. While the two were shopping together, PP Jane casually picked up the bag and immediately noticed something was off. After a closer look, she pointed out that the stitching felt off, and it didn't match an authentic bag. Fishball was stunned. The personal shopper she trusted had sold her a fake bag. She had just spent 30,000 yuan on a counterfeit. The money hurt, but it wasn't what frightened her the most. What terrified her was how close she'd come to exposing the life she spent years constructing. If someone like PP Jane could spot the difference within seconds, everything she had built could unravel just as fast. But once the initial panic faded, another realization took its place. She had studied these brands. If a counterfeit had fooled even her, how many other people could it fool? So she started doing more research. What she found stunned her. This wasn't street vendor knockoff. Some counterfeit factories had gotten sophisticated enough that they dismantled authentic luxury bags piece by piece, studied every detail, and rebuilt them so convincingly that even collectors sometimes couldn't tell the difference. After days of researching the sellers, she ordered what was advertised as one of the highest quality replicas available, paying just the 10th of the price tag. Her intentions were simple in the beginning. She just wanted to replace the fake Celine bag she'd accidentally bought to avoid another embarrassing mistake. When the bag arrived, she could hardly believe what she was holding. The leather felt right. The stitching was nearly identical. Even comparing it to authentic bags she'd handled before, she struggled to find any obvious differences. The real test came a few days later when she carried it to meet up with her influencer friends. No one noticed. For the first time, Fishballs realized that she could project the same image of wealth without paying luxury prices. She began quietly replacing more and more of the expensive items in her wardrobe with high-end counterfeits, convincing herself nobody was being harmed. After all, she wasn't selling them. She wasn't scamming anyone. She was simply doing the same thing she'd done for years. But maintaining that image still came at a cost. As her following continued to grow, so did the hunger for more. Even high-end counterfeits weren't enough to keep up with the image she had created. At the same time, she was growing closer to a circle of truly wealthy influencers. None of them represented the life she envied more than Salami Panini, one of the wealthiest women in the group. The first time Fishball stayed overnight at Salami's apartment, she found herself silently standing in front of an enormous walk-in closet. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, lined with Hermes Birkin and Kelly bags in almost every color imaginable. To Fishballs, it looked less like someone's personal collection and more like a luxury boutique. What struck her the most wasn't the value of the bags, it was how casually Salami treated them, pulling one off the shelf without a second thought, setting it down on the sofa, and moving on with her day. Bags Fishballs had spent years dreaming about were just ordinary objects to someone else. She couldn't get that out of her head. Salami genuinely trusted her. She welcomed her into her home, treated her like a younger sister, and never once worried about leaving her alone among possessions worth millions of yuan. Fishballs had spent years convincing herself she belonged in this world. Standing in that walk-in closet, she began wondering if there was a faster way to make that fantasy real. If one bag disappeared, would she even notice? What had begun as envy slowly turned into jealousy, and that slowly turned into entitlement. Fishballs began contacting counterfeit factories directly, searching for manufacturers capable of matching Salami's bags down to the smallest detail. Whenever she had the chance, she quietly photographs the bags in Salami's collection, capturing the stitching, hardware, and leather so that factories could recreate them as accurately as possible. The deeper she dug, the more confident she grew. She discovered that the highest quality replicas had gotten so sophisticated that some even included embedded chips. The line between real and fake was becoming almost impossible to see. More importantly, the line inside her own mind was starting to disappear too. She had spent years pretending to live a wealthy life. Now she was starting to believe she deserved one. One weekend, Salami invited her to stay the night again. Fishballs arrived carrying a large suitcase, saying it was filled with clothes and equipment for a photo shoot the following week. Without a second thought, Salami smiled and helped her carry it inside. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Fishball lay awake, staring at the ceiling. At 3 in the morning, she quietly got out of bed and made her way into Salami's walk-in closet. Using her phone's flashlight, she located the exact Hermes Kelly bag she spent weeks preparing to copy. She removed the authentic bag, placed the counterfeit in its place, and carefully packed the real one into the bottom of her suitcase. When she returned to bed, Salami was still asleep beside her, completely unaware that one of the most valuable bags in her collection had just been swapped out by one of her best friends. That single success gave Fishballs the confidence to keep going. What started as one impulsive decision soon became a carefully planned scheme. Whenever she was invited to stay overnight, she'd wait until everyone in the apartment had gone to sleep before beginning her heist. Handbags were only the beginning. Over time, she began taking jewelry, luxury watches, designer clothing, and even high-end cosmetics belonging to Salami's mother, carefully packing each item into the suitcase she brought with her. According to investigators, in just a few months, the total value of items taken from Salami's home exceeded 4 million yuan, equivalent to around $600,000. Some of the items stayed in Fishball's own apartment, while others were quietly sold through second-hand luxury dealers she'd already built relationships with, turning her friends' possessions directly into cash. But somewhere along the line, the thefts stopped being just about luxury goods. As Fishball spent more time around Salami, she also began borrowing pieces of her identity. On private social media accounts and in conversations with fans, she gradually adopted details of Salami's family background as her own, claiming her father ran a business in Australia and her mother owned a luxury skincare company. When followers asked about her relationship with Salami, she even claimed they were stepsisters, portraying herself as the caring younger sister while inventing an entirely fictional history. By then, Fishballs wasn't pretending to be wealthy anymore. She was pretending to be someone else. After gaining enough confidence, she turned her attention to the rest of the friend group. One of her next targets were PP Jang, whose classic Chanel flat bag got replaced using the same method. For weeks, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then one day, as PP Jang was getting ready to leave the house, she reached for her Chanel bag and noticed something strange. She tried adjusting the shoulder chain from a single strap into a double chain, something she'd done countless times before, but this time it wouldn't move. At first, she figured the bag was just damaged, but the longer she looked at it, the more wrong it felt. The leather felt stiffer than she remembered. Small details she'd never noticed before suddenly stood out. This didn't make any sense. She bought it directly from the Chanel boutique, and it had spent nearly all its time inside her own apartment. Very few people had ever handled it, and every one of them was someone she completely trusted. As she replayed the last few months in her head, one person kept coming back to her: Fishballs. PP Jang remembered that whenever Fishballs came over, she always carried an unusually large backpack. Looking back, it suddenly seemed odd, but almost as quickly as the suspicion appeared, she dismissed it. Fishballs had been one of her closest friends for years. She was thoughtful, dependable, always the first person to help when someone needed her. Accusing her of something like this felt almost absurd. Unable to shake the feeling, PP Jang eventually decided to confront her. Fishballs immediately denied everything. She got emotional, insisting she she would never betray her friends, before opening her banking app to show PP Jane a 7-figure account balance. There was absolutely no reason why she would be stealing. By the time they left, Jane had spent hours apologizing for ever suspecting her. But once she got home, Jane couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She called her best friend, Sui Jiao, and explained everything that had happened. After listening carefully, Sui hesitated before admitting that a few of her own luxury bags had started feeling different too. The two began comparing photographs of their collections. Within hours, they realized the problem wasn't limited to a single Chanel bag. Multiple handbags had been tampered with. What they had first dismissed as an impossible coincidence suddenly became something much worse. Their closest friend had been systematically stealing from all of them. Realizing they might not be the only victims, the women created a WeChat group dedicated to comparing missing items and identifying anyone else who'd spent time around little Fishballs. What started as one suspicious handbag quickly grew into an investigation of their own. Sure enough, the group chat filled with messages fast, and one by one, they realized they'd been targeted. By the time Salami Panini joined the group and finished going through the bags in her walk-in closet, everyone was stunned by the sheer scale of what had happened. Together, they gathered photographs of the counterfeit bags, chat records, surveillance footage, and every piece of evidence they could find before walking into the police station to file a report. Not long afterward, police arrived at Fishball's apartment. At the time, she was mid-livestream, sitting in front of the camera. She appeared exactly how her followers had always known her, smiling, composed, recommending a new lipstick to her audience. When the doorbell rang, she casually told her viewers to hang on a second, assuming it was just another delivery. The moment she opened the door and saw the officers standing outside, her expression changed. Before she had time to end the livestream, viewers watched officers enter the apartment as the carefully crafted persona she spent years building collapsed in front of them. When the investigators searched the apartment, they found exactly what the victims had described. Luxury handbags, jewelry, watches, and designer accessories filled the room. Alongside multiple high-end counterfeit bags, investigators believed were intended for future swaps. Faced with the evidence, Fishballs admitted to carrying out the thefts. The case quickly attracted national attention. An influencer who secretly stole millions from her own friends was already shocking enough, but the sheer scale of the deception made it one of the most talked about stories on the Chinese internet. Discussions quickly spread beyond the thefts themselves, with many questioning how someone could spend years building genuine friendships while secretly taking advantage of the very people who trusted her the most. For the victims, though, the story was never really about the money. Salami Panini, despite suffering the greatest financial loss, expressed that what hurt her the most wasn't the value of the stolen luxury goods, but the realization that someone she genuinely cared about and treated like a sister has spent years taking advantage of her kindness. To her, the friendship had always been worth far more than any Hermes bag ever could. When the case reached court, Fishball appeared stripped of the carefully curated image that had defined her online career. She admitted to the thefts and apologized to the friends she'd betrayed, expressing regret for what she'd done. But by then, the evidence was overwhelming. Based on the total value of the stolen property, the court found her guilty of theft on an exceptionally large scale and sentenced her to a lengthy prison term. When this story first broke across China, most people saw it as another influencer scandal, a woman obsessed with luxury handbags who betrayed her closest friends for money. But I don't think that's what this story is about. She didn't become little Fishballs overnight. She spent years learning how to build a version of herself that other people wanted to believe in. First, it was lighting, camera angles, and carefully edited photographs. Then it became counterfeit handbags. Eventually, pretending to own a luxury lifestyle wasn't enough anymore. She wanted the real thing, even if it belonged to someone else. Somewhere along the way, the line between performance and reality disappeared. Social media makes that line easier to cross than ever before. Every day, we're shown carefully curated versions of other people's lives, where wealth, success, and happiness appear effortless. The problem is that after staring at those performances long enough, it's easy to forget that they're performances after all. The tragedy of this case isn't that Fishballs stole millions worth of luxury goods. It's that she spent years chasing an identity that never really existed. In the end, the designer handbags, the expensive cafes, the luxury apartments, and the glamorous influencer lifestyle all turned out to be exactly what they had been from the very beginning, a performance. I'm Richard, and this was Dark Silk. If you have any thoughts on this case, drop a comment below. I read every single one. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to keep following these regional cases from the East. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next week.